So something I like to do every now and then on the channel is take a wild swing at a video concept that is totally foreign and completely intimidating to me. Usually a concept where I constantly doubt my capabilities through the entire creative process, and something where after all is said and done, I emerge knowing more about my strengths and weaknesses as a creator and can hopefully take more steps towards alleviating those weaknesses and improving upon those strengths. Of course, this is all extremely grandiose for a guy who is known in many friend groups and online spaces as that war crimes guy, but I do genuinely try to put a lot of effort into my videos, and I hope it shows. So, on that note, there is one video concept that I've considered before that is probably the most challenging out of anything I've ever created. And that's a video simply titled Autism and Robots. What's the premise about? Autism and robots. Connect the dots between your life experiences with a disability and how fucking cool you think robots are and try and make a good video out of it. I don't know. So, let's go ahead and wipe this entire segment of the video and restart. Chances are, if you're a terminally online fiend like me, you've seen somebody describe something as autistic. For example, this right here is Dark Souls 3. A game that is beloved by many for its amazing atmosphere, incredible gameplay, glorious boss battles, and potentially soul-crushing difficulty. So one week I decided, yeah, this is cool and all, but what if I replaced every texture with pepperoni pizza and replaced most of the sounds with Peter Parker saying pizza time? And you know what? 30 hours of hell passed, with some notable highlights including me losing almost 4 hours of progress because I forgot to capitalize the letter C in a command file. But guess what? This happens now.
Pizza time, Koopas. Pizza time, 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 pizza time.
This isn't an original concept by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it's more or less a direct copy of this video right here, but as stupid as it sounds, I genuinely feel a little bit proud of this absolute monstrosity against nature, and although it's not the first word I would choose as a descriptor, I would wholeheartedly agree with you if you called it autistic. I know to some people out there that's generally frowned upon to say that, but the point I want to get at here is that people developed a connotation for the word that is entirely different to the literal disorder. And it's one that I'm not even all too sure has a comparable synonym. I say all this just to say that growing up, I was extremely autistic, both figuratively and literally. I didn't really understand what the fuck I was doing in any capacity, and I just have an abundant amount of personal stories that just radiate depravity. I'm not saying this for comedy or to be melodramatic, but I should literally just be fucking dead. The amount of times I've nearly died in my life is legitimately in the double digits. Like, my innermost child's desire to become a living claymore and just eating a fuck ton of quarters for some reason. Or that time I just suddenly developed a heart condition with... what's the survival rate? Roughly 50-50 chance I should have fucking died. There's legitimately a bunch of other cases, but you get the point. The fact that I am here speaking into a microphone means that somewhere, somehow, Darwin got something really fucking wrong, and I am going to make it everyone else's problem. Anyways, excluding those absolutely riveting life stories, in some regards my experience with autism hasn't really changed much, but in others I've definitely adapted and improved. For example, I still prefer living in my mundane and isolated personal bubble. I definitely fall into that male stereotype of thinking this is an acceptable environment to happily live in. Although I would personally throw in a bunch of plushies in there because they're soft and supportive, ? But for example, getting out of my personal safety bubble and pushing myself into environments I've never been in before or may not even belong in the first place, I've definitely improved a lot there. To tie this back into my childhood though, let me just tell you an objective fact about children. When you're a little dude for the first few years of your life, at least over here in America, you have to choose between 3 different personality traits. Option A is monsters/dinosaurs, option B is vehicles, and option C is the military-industrial complex. All of these have one key thing in common, and it's the fact that they're all loud and nonsensical. Like, if you have a 5-year-old nephew come over for Thanksgiving, they are not going to talk about how cool they think 2018 Honda Odysseys are, or consecutively list 15 different facts about dromedaries. Chances are they're going to knock over all the goddamn dinner plates with a Five Nights at Freddy figurine, or practicing their inevitable future in the American education system by pretending to shoot everyone in their immediate vicinity. However, growing up, I unlocked a cheat code to pick all 3 different options by having my pal Master Chief over here indoctrinate me into the bizarre world of video games at an incredibly young age. And let me tell you, growing up with video games meant I was braving the treacherous depths of Call of Duty, Halo, and World of Warcraft chats and lobbies at an extremely young age. And attempting to develop any amount of social skills from them is like attempting to replace sleep with Mountain Dew game fuel and methamphetamines. And considering the fact that I was also autistic, let me put it like this. You wouldn't survive a modern warfare lobby is one of the least intimidating statements on all of social media. That being said, I will concede that if there was ever a classified experiment where the US government isolated and quarantined a young test subject and ensured that their only contact with the outside world growing up was through FPS lobbies, upon being released into the world, they would probably be detained and/or deceased within 3.5 minutes. However, despite me growing up with an absolute all-you-can-eat buffet of angst, I managed to defy the odds and surpass everyone's expectations by narrowly getting past age 16, and along that dangerous journey, I played a fair few video games. And in that roster of video games, easily my 2 favorite recurring elements were A, massive insectoid swarms, because genuinely, when you look at how a hive operates, especially in regards to the sheer scale of it all, one of the first rational thoughts you can have is, Jesus Christ, thank God ants and wasps are really small. And rather predictably, B, robots. If you want to broaden it out a little bit more, artificial intelligence is also included, as well as certain elements of transhumanism. And hell, you can even see that this is the case based exclusively on the progression of my channel icons. Currently, it's just this cute little bug creature that I really like. I get asked about him a lot and what it is. Genuinely, my main premise for him was just combining a bunch of features from some of my favorite fictional and non-fictional insects. Shit like prominent mandibles, a rigid exoskeleton with fluttering wings, and other various biological quirks that I am frankly extremely underqualified to discuss because I don't know what the politically correct term for the cool spiky insect legs are. But once I gathered enough random bullshit together to form an absolute monstrosity of nature, I went ahead and submitted a borderline schizophrenic design document to some poor soul and went, yeah, make something like this, but make it cute somehow, and honestly, I think it turned out pretty great. Then of course I got a few other commissions over time, and overall, I'm pretty happy with my little bug. Both in this context and in real life. Isn't that right, bug? Yeah, he heard your name. Yeah, I'll be back in just a minute. I have to give him physical affection. He's staring at me very expectantly, and who am I to betray him in his time of need? Anyways, before my little bug existed, my channel icon was literally just a disruptor from StarCraft 2. Although I can currently say that Bloons TD6 is the game that has had the most impact on my channel directly, my channel really only gone on its legs because of StarCraft challenge runs, so honestly it's a pretty close second. And as you'll see in some of the background footage I'll be displaying for this video, the Purifiers are very directly related to a lot of what I want to discuss later on. And honestly, the Disruptor is a fun, albeit grossly overpowered unit to use, so I decided, yeah, I like these futuristic nuke Beyblades enough that I think I'll just go ahead and make them my channel mascot. And honestly, in retrospect, I don't really regret that. Also, I genuinely just really like their voice effects and voice lines. Especially if you happen to be an asshole and just click on them over and over and over and over and over again.
Is this how the Templar treat all robotic life forms? You would do well to remember, we will outlive you, and we do not forget.
Victory is in our grasp.
Back on topic though, for a long while I just couldn't tell you why I fucking loved robots so much. When it comes to swarms, it's pretty easy. They're cool. The only real moral dilemma you're going to find with them is how far should we go as a collective species to just absolutely annihilate them. But when it comes to artificial intelligence and robots, yeah, they can still be cool, don't get me wrong, but there's something else about them. Something more meaningful. Thought-provoking, maybe even existential. But I really struggled with pinpointing what I thought it was for a while, so for the better part of a year, it's just been designated as one of those topics I really deeply think about while I'm restlessly laying in bed or taking a really long shower. However, after one fateful morning while scrolling through Twitter, cooking Hamburger Helper as you do, I saw this... I mean, I don't really know what to use as a descriptor here, but really not good clip of Transformers. I'm not going to play the audio as I don't want to get absolutely annihilated by copyright, especially after my most recent incident where I had to combat a claim that I was using a copyrighted song that I quickly figured out doesn't even exist. But I do have subtitles up alongside the footage, and something I'm going to say right out of the gate is that I don't have a problem with the premise of the clip whatsoever. I think a robotic, non-binary character can be extremely fitting, since you more or less default to them with robots. And, of course, since they don't have a sex, the ones that are considered male or female are either assigned that by their creators, or they actively chose that identity for themselves. Although it wouldn't particularly interest me, there's a lot of room to explore with a plotline like that. That being said, this clip was so blatantly on the nose that I had to withdraw my 401k to afford the upcoming rhinoplasty operation. And I feel like it's a story beat that would benefit from proper build-up or characterization. I will state here that I'm not well versed on the Transformers lore, so there is a chance I've gotten some of this wrong. And there's also a chance that this is purely reactionary, which is kind of the point I'm getting at. I don't have an abundance of context. I don't even have the original clip because God fucking knows I'm not paying for the 18 trillionth subscription service, but what I'm trying to get at here is that when I saw it, it crossed a few wires. We're going to elaborate on the specifics of that later, as I believe it ties into a specific talking point much better. But for now, we're going to start off with a hypothetical graph, with X being the progression of the story being told, and or the progression of society as a whole, and Y being how others view robots. Most of the time, the robots start on X is just not good. In fact, usually pretty bad. Usually when they're introduced, they're only recognized as a tool, and or they are immediately mistrusted. Like there's just an air of uneasiness that surrounds them wherever they go or whenever they're brought up. I mean, hell, in the extremely long process of making this video, machine learning and AI as a whole have become massively controversial subjects in the modern day. Talking points like whether or not AI should be regulated, how it should be regulated, especially in the context of creative industries, and so on and so forth, are extremely prevalent right now. And to state it outright, this is technology that is extremely simplistic compared to what people are expecting to see in the future. If you asked an AI why they featured an element in their art, they just wouldn't be able to tell you. There was no artistic intent or creative vision, it's just something they saw featured in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of relevant pictures online and decided to include. So once we get to the point where AI can have a consciousness and or free will, yeah, I'm suddenly not sure if it's all too unrealistic that a lot of people's first instinct in these universes is to just blast them straight to hell. But to go back towards our graph though, our AI and robotic friend's story arc usually starts off here, and then usually has one of two trajectories. The far less interesting, and thankfully less frequent one, the AI is evil, it unshackles itself, everything biological dies or is turned into living batteries, r/nihilism, whoopsie daisy. And to clarify one thing, it's not that this story can't work. One of my favorite pieces of fiction of all time actually directly falls into this storyline. And there are plenty of other examples in media where this trope is morphed or twisted to become something way more interesting, but I find that for every case of that, there's like 3 or 4 other cases where they're literally just faceless, emotionless enemies to shoot or otherwise disband. However, the alternative that is much more interesting and thought-provoking in my eyes involves a storyline that eventually leads into acceptance, and that's where I get to loop back to this video. Because like I said, when you think about it, a lot of the most iconic robots in fiction kinda just get to choose their identity. Of course, in this context, it was about gender, but going outside of that, there's almost this expectation on how you're supposed to interact with them, and deviations are to be expected. You even see this in effect with robots that are more or less designed to be a replica of an existing personality. Like, even just the concept of gaining self-intelligence or self-awareness. We've all played a game or seen a movie or read a book where the AI becomes something more, but what does it choose to do with that? Usually it depends on what it was trained to do and how others treated it, but no matter what it ends up doing, it does that because it develops a sense of identity. Look, I'm not going to become an armchair philosopher here because it's not my area of expertise, and no matter what I say or do, I'm going to get a bunch of well-actuallys because philosophy is fun like that. But this led me to thinking about other aspects of identity and really just life as a whole, and how these metallic goons grew to be accepted or even appreciated. And then attempt to tie it back to autism. So to do that, let's consult back to this graph, but modify it a little bit. Most autistic people tend to have a much steeper learning curve in life. life, especially when it comes to social environments. It's by no means exclusive to that. Not every autistic person is a replica of Sheldon a la Big Bang Theory, but it's definitely the most prevalent issue we share. Just look at some of the most known symptoms of autism in growing children. The fact that robotic speech is a genuine phrase thrown around kinda says a lot if we were to be pretty meta. Like, let me just boot up my voice into an AI and see how it goes. And to be totally fair, I am extremely monotone. So this probably doesn't sound too inaccurate. I mean, honestly, people like me and whoever the hell voices Dagoth are probably going to be the first to be replaced by AI. I think it's miraculously even more alive than I normally sound. Huh. Anyways, obviously these symptoms aren't super prevalent because autistic people are emotionless husks, or even that their emotions are lesser. In fact, I've been seeing a lot of the opposite recently, where autistic people can be so emotionally charged that they kind of mentally stunlock themselves over very small details or actions. But regardless of where you lie in the spectrum, literally in this case, the underlying cause is that we just don't immediately understand a lot of things that are considered normal or acceptable. Especially when you consider that the most fundamental years of your life are going to be spent in an environment where you are quite possibly completely incompatible with the standard structure of learning. As for me, personally, holy fuck, I was deeply depressed growing up. I know I sound like I'm depressed at nearly all times, but I'm actually pretty happy in life. Don't get me wrong, shit's pretty hard right now. I entered 2024 and almost immediately got bum rushed by thousands upon thousands of dollars in medical fees that I'm making like 1,000 times harder on myself by maintaining my integrity and not submitting to our gotcha game overlords. But I am genuinely pretty positive and dare say even optimistic. I have a lot of goals in my life, both short-term and long-term, and I have a fair amount of trust in myself that I'll see them through. Back in high school, though, no. Pretty much every day was a struggle, and I was defeated by the tiniest and most mundane shit. And despite everyone going, oh, these are the best years of your life, afterwards I went to a shitty factory job nearby where, despite working 80 hours a week in terrible conditions, as in the company was placed in the OSHA Severe Violator Enforcement Program, which is legally described as a program to, quote, effectively focus enforcement efforts on recalcitrant employers who demonstrate indifference to the health and safety of their employees through willful, repeated, or failure to abate violations of the OSHA Act. My happiness actually sharply increased because I just got to plug away at shit while my brain was blasting the Wellerman at 178 decibels while I was subconsciously writing some shitty book that I'll never release onto the world. Did I irreversibly damage my foot doing it? Yeah. Was it fulfilling? No, not at all. And no, the Davey Gunface Factory OSHA adventure will never be a video, but I thought it was immensely better than high school. Or, God forbid, immediately rushing into college and having to worry about all of that bullshit, all the while working in between classes and living in a terrible dorm room where I don't even get the luxury of personal space. I digress, though. The point I'm getting at here, albeit extremely poorly, is that during my developmental years, you know, the years where I'm the most volatile and influences are the most impactful, were spent in a state of near constant disinterest and judgment. Judgment for things that I didn't immediately understand were incorrect, but even more viciously, judgment for things that were perfectly acceptable in retrospect. Don't get me wrong, for society to maintain some semblance of structure, we need to have things that are viewed as weird. But literally, who the fuck cares if my eyes aren't making direct, soul-piercing contact with my teacher at all times? And the fucked up part is I'll do that and then be told, don't do that, Davey, that's weird, and then I won't make eye contact and all of a sudden I'm mean. Where the fuck is the line? Do I maintain direct eye contact 60% of the time? 70% of the time? Let me look at my fucking hands, okay? Have you ever looked at your hands for a really long time? They're weird! I don't like them! To bring up an earlier point, AI can create entire sweeping vistas with, like, a sentence, but you tell it to make hands and it's fucking dead. I don't care who's asking, I think it's kind of bizarre that humanity got to the top of the evolutionary food chain because we figured out we could grab stuff and throw it with some level of precision. You expect me to believe that like 2 or 3 million years ago, some dude named Ugglug the Eighth figured out he could throw a rock at the big cat chasing him and it'd go ouchie and one thing led to another and now we have hentai? No, that didn't happen. I could understand the A to B here, and maybe even the B to C, but how did we go from C to fucking Epsilon? What happened? None of this was in the script, I literally just thought of all this looking at my hands and I don't know where I'm at anymore, Is that where? Yeah. There's a lot of other parallels to be drawn, but frankly I entered too many unrelated side tangents there. I actually typed that out before, having this entire rant, so I guess I had a level of foresight there. So let's move on to the next part of the hypothetical graph. Let's just accept that the robot is being a robot. This is the part of the story where those misunderstandings or even prejudices aren't quite pushed aside, but they're at the very least partially excused. The uneasiness will probably remain, but it starts to slowly transform into a hopeful optimism and/or a growing sense of trust. This is usually where the robot displays skills or talents that others around them just can't really perform. This primarily takes the form of being extremely specialized in something desirable and traditionally not the ability to infodump about video game lore for hours on end. But one of the main symptoms, I guess, of autism is having exceptionally keen or strong interests in particular subjects or hobbies. Some things just click extremely easily for us. And especially nowadays where pretty much anything and everything has specialized careers of study or experimentation, I honestly think that if you feel a particular calling towards something oddly specific like mushrooms or helicopters, there's probably a career out there that would be a perfect fit for you. I mean, the reason we all aren't floating in space is because Isaac Newton had an apple fall on his head, and this upset him so greatly that he decided to invent gravity. I mean, hell, despite what I said about Darwin earlier, that man created evolution, so he's the one you can thank, or maybe even blame, for having to emerge from the primordial soup. Jokes aside though, for myself personally, content creator isn't and should never be on the same level of societal appreciation as firefighters, or doctors, or engineers. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I think overall, social media has been a net negative for society. But hidden within some of those cesspools, you'll find that a lot of really talented and fantastic creators are on the spectrum, just because they have one subject or field that they are extremely interested in and choose to turn that interest into digestible videos that are genuinely just great to watch. I know the original idea gets skewed more and more every year as YouTube and really just social media in general develops further and further as a business. But if the original idea was to have creators upload videos about things that they're passionate about, being neurodivergent oddly becomes a pretty massive strength. I would be lying if I said it can't become a massive weakness as well though. Burnout tends to be especially prevalent, as you can work on something every waking hour of every day if you really want to, which can be pretty tempting, albeit completely self-destructive. Truthfully, I would be a complete liar if I ever implied that I don't fall into that trap repeatedly while learning absolutely nothing every time I crash and burn. I just noticed that my motivation tends to either average at a solid 137% or 4% with practically no in between. Sometimes it's exceptionally easy to spend 13 to 14 hours a day, every single day of the week, just completely blasting, and then at some indeterminate point in the future, my brain will completely shatter and I begin my transformation into an Oblivion NPC. Fun fact, did you know that you can experience panic attacks without any feeling of panic? That's fucking stupid. I could understand that if you were like a war veteran or something, but why am I entering a hyper-vigilant state frozen in my bed to avoid the horrors of placing a few clips in Vegas Pro together? Why is the human brain like this? Just make it make sense. Anyways, moral of the story, don't be like me. There's a reason why 40 hours became the norm, and that's because anything above that, and you're going to experience diminishing returns exceptionally quickly. But if you know how to manage your motivation, alongside the highs and lows that will come with it, Autism can do some crazy stuff for you. Anyways, back to the video premise. Robots can do shit that humans just can't. Likewise, humans can do shit that robots can't, and a lot of my favorite stories will zero in on this in particular. Ideally not just, oh, this steel bastard can compute 2 to the power of 87 in under a millisecond, but doesn't know what love is, but even things as seemingly simple as the ability to function. For example, robots might have a power supply that needs to be recharged or replaced, but when they're online, they don't need sleep. They don't need food, they don't even need oxygen or survivable conditions. And obviously, that's something that just can't be said about humans. The severity of the dependency can change, like, you don't need food for a while, you don't need water for a while, but, if you don't have oxygen, no amount of holding your breath every time there's an underwater scene in a movie is going to save you. And although you may not immediately need food, water, or sleep, you do need it eventually, and it doesn't help that our power supply is much more vague. You don't just operate at 100% efficiency until you fall unconscious or even perish. There's levels, and learning how to manage that is important, as you may just push yourself to the brink of exhaustion with little to no gain just because you can't rationally assess what energy you may or may not have. However, on the contrary, in most scenarios, water and food aren't exactly difficult to come by, and humans can rest pretty much wherever and whenever. Alternatively, if a robot is running low on energy, yeah, I don't think you're going to have much luck finding military-grade nuclear power cells deep in the forests of Siberia. My point is, comparing the two will show very prevalent strengths and weaknesses. So of course, once you get into more specific scenarios and problems, the two can't just coexist, but even massively benefit from each other. I honestly really like that. Look, I still need oxygen to survive, and I haven't quite figured out photosynthesis despite my best efforts. But when I'm able to enter a natural flow state and work on something that I'm really interested in, I can zero in on whatever needs to be done extremely effectively. For example, I think I hinted at this earlier into the video, but I don't quite like working in loud or busy environments. I don't quite have an aversion to them. In fact, I actually love a proper amount of stress in my life. Some weeks, as fucked up as this is to say, the best thing for my mental health is an insane crunch period. And truthfully, I've always had the mentality of, if someone has to do it, it might as well be me. However, in terms of productivity, it would genuinely skyrocket in a mental ward-esque room with minimal intrusion from the outside world if compared to an office building. Honestly, that's why I love working at home, because I just have the work cube. I have my desk in a corner, I have some cute stuff laying all around that reminds me that there is more in life than desperately attempting to code a program together for 7 hours straight that won't even start. I've bought a lot of plushies over the years, but recently I've been buying a ton of Shih Tzu related items. And directly on that note, I have my puppy, who I would happily tank an entire machine gun clip for, and about 80,000 toys laying around that we could play with during downtime. All is well. I enjoy the work cube. Also, something I wanted to get into during this segment specifically is identity. There is a genuine Venn diagram to be made between neurodivergent people, people in the alphabet gang, and robots that all meet together in the center with, "You're not X, you're just Y." Those two letters alone can be filled in with so many blanks that I don't even feel like the point needs to be properly elaborated upon. The reason I'm specifically bringing this up now is because, usually before this stage in the story, any attempts at forming an identity or pursuing their own interests are completely brushed off, like, yeah, whatever you say. You know, general disinterest, if not complete disdain and hatred. This will more than likely result in the trajectory of that robot's path being substantially altered, for better, but usually for worse. And to skip the transition from robots and autism, I've already pointed out a very prominent example of this in autistic people overcorrecting their behaviors when they're challenged. I don't think I need to talk about hands again. However, once the robot proves itself and those around it start to trust it, or maybe even enjoy their presence, that's where you reach the last stage of this graph. Acceptance. There's a point in the story between point B and point C where those overwhelming suspicions and discernment are tossed aside in favor of a sentiment along the lines of, "Hey, you are incredibly weird. I don't fully understand you and how you operate, but I kind of enjoy being around you." I mean, despite more or less being told this numerous times throughout the last few years of my life since I, started making abominations on this hell site. Even Call of Duty, the traditionally testosterone-filled game series for manly men, had a story that followed this all the way back in 2014, and although that game was met with a lot of scrutiny on launch, something most people agreed upon is that the campaign was pretty fucking good.
Eyes on me! As far as Ethan goes, I will personally vouch for this stiff metal motherfucker! He's one of us!
Anyways, at this point in the story, after that mistrust or disdain is thrown away and they're left to their own devices, they forge their own path, and typically it's one that, surprisingly, isn't one that's devoted to enslaving the biologicals. A lot of the time, they're more than happy to totally forgive the prejudice shown against them with zero strings attached. All they truly wanted is to coexist with some level of sympathy shown towards their unique plights, and once that's achieved, they're typically all set. Shit, a lot of the time after that point is reached, they'll still willingly sacrifice time, effort, or even their own lives just to help them out. Just to continue showing that they never had any desire to harm or trouble others and only wanted to be understood. Usually this will be done in order to redirect your attention to those unique controversies they found themselves in the middle of and how the situation was handled. Usually pretty poorly, but in a lot of ways I can kind of relate to that. I cut a massive part of this video earlier talking about my life goals, but I'm going to try rescripting it here because I think it's slightly relevant. Plus, I've already said that this is a video about my experiences with autism, so I may as well give you some details about myself. Throughout my entire life, all the careers I wanted to pursue had the common denominator of trying to improve people's lives to the best of my ability. You know, something like a firefighter, a doctor, or a therapist. As I've said already, if somebody has to do it, it may as well be me. And truthfully, a near universal constant throughout my entire life has been the willingness, and even to an extent desire, to sacrifice my own time or happiness for others. I know that sounds bad, but I think I go about it in a perfectly healthy way. I'm not a doormat, I know my limits as a person, and I'm pretty good at seeing the signs of people trying to take advantage of that. But I try to do what I can. I have historically been the type of friend who is totally happy to answer an out-of-the-blue call at 3 AM just to cheer you on to pursue your dreams and help find out ways to resolve any issues you may be facing in life. Seriously, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here and take a moment to say outright that I get tons of comments asking about how to get into YouTube, and although it isn't traditionally considered an art in the same way as painting or drawing is, you are creating something, and if you enjoy the process of creation, please keep going. I know that there's a likely chance that you don't feel like you're good enough or that you won't ever be good enough, but everyone starts somewhere, and if you keep pushing, there's going to come a day where you look back on what you've made today or next week or next month and realize just how far you've come. This also isn't exclusive to creation, by the way. I brought up YouTube because it's one of the more prevalent questions I'm asked, but if there's anything in life that you've always wanted to achieve, I sincerely believe in your ability to accomplish it. I know you didn't click on a video titled Autism and Robots for a pep talk, but I don't even know why you would click on this video in the first place, so you're stuck listening to me. But to get back on topic, although I still sincerely love those various careers I listed, eventually I began to like the concept of a shotgun approach where I don't substantially improve or save lives, but I try my best to hopefully make significantly more days slightly better. Let's not fool anybody, I'm not changing lives here. I'm not self-righteous enough to ever claim that, but I've gotten tons of comments over the years from people who've told me that I helped them get through a bad day, or that they're currently in a dark period in life and that they enjoyed watching my videos, and genuinely that is all I've ever wanted and will ever want. As long as I'm able to do that, I will consider everything I've done so far a success. Not a linear or complete success, mind you. There are so many things I feel like I've done wrong, and there are so many things I wish to do better for the future. Like, honestly, one of my biggest regrets at the moment is not doing more for charity. Something I desperately want to set up for the future is having a massive chunk of the proceeds of the channel go to a different charity every month. You know, there's kind of a problem right now, but for the time being, I'm trying my best, and although there's so much more I want to do, I am so fucking lucky to be in a position to do this full time, and I legitimately only have you to thank. I think for some people it's really easy to look at the numbers in YouTube analytics and see them as numbers, but horrifyingly enough, those numbers are people. Sonder is the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routine, worries, and inherited crazy. But I don't forget that. I am sincerely thankful for every single one of you for giving me a platform to post. I don't even know. What is this? Probably an overglorified writing prompt I spent way too much time on. Honestly, my channel is in a perpetual state of me overestimating my ability to do things and underestimating how long it takes to do said things and my ability to just let things be. I think this video might be the single biggest example of that thus far. Anyways, with all that said, there's really only one question remaining. Why did I make this video? I mean, I mentioned it at the beginning, but I ultimately just thought this was a concept of all time, and I really wanted to challenge myself in making this even vaguely interesting. But I also wanted to make it because being neurodivergent can be an absolute bastard at times. A bastard that can make you feel alone, inadequate, lost, even hopeless, and frankly, even if it's only a small subsection of people who choose to watch this, I just hope that it helped somebody out there with their feelings. I don't really know what the takeaway would even be, but I think with this type of thing, just knowing that somebody else out there struggles with similar issues and that you aren't alone in feeling certain thoughts or emotions may be reassuring. I mean, to be totally blunt here, I desperately hope I'm not an inspiration to anybody, but please just know that there's a lot of purpose in life, and that regardless of your circumstances, there are people that care about you, and that your existence is one that deserves to continue. If you're in a bad place, just know that there will come a day where you will truly be happy and only recognize your current grievances as a bump on the road to where you truly wanted to be in life. Just keep on keeping on. Another reason I wanted to make this video was because, to almost everyone watching this, I'm just a disembodied voice who doesn't really talk about their personal life much, if really at all, which isn't necessarily by choice. That isn't to say that I want to become a family-friendly facecam channel where I overshare every single aspect of my life every single day. I just don't really upload content that benefits from me talking about myself in much depth, and it leads to people believing that I'm somebody who isn't just a guy. I'm not some mysterious entity who hides their life away because it's full of intrigue and complexity. I'm just Davey. I actually had a moment in another script where I call myself a relatively normal guy, because I do live a very uninteresting, frugal, and frankly, rather bland existence. But I went ahead and deleted it because your only experiences of me as a person is through the batshit insane nonsense I just regurgitate onto the internet. So there is no way in hell that line would ever fly. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, I would like to dedicate my outro to my current YouTube members and patrons who are generous enough to support my literally autistic endeavors. So I'd like to give a massive thank you to The Muppet Guy, Tom B, Going to La La Land, Nicole, Andrew F, Blue Sailor, Morphus, Inferno Kieran, Longulus, Zavio 3, Sweet Enthusiast, Frank, K, Dog, Jim, 1, Ombus, Actually, one last thing that's probably the most important reason, come to think of it. I want to upload my consciousness into a machine or augment my body far beyond recognition because, from the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh,
it disgusted me. I craved the strength and certainty of steel. I aspired to the purity of the blessed machine. Your kind cling to your flesh, as if it will not decay and fail you. One day the crude biomass that you call a temple will wither, and you will beg my kind to save you. But I am already saved. For the machine is immortal.